talk about restraining orders. There's 4 different kinds of restraining orders. You have a criminal protective order, domestic violence restraining order, civil harassment restraining order, and a stay-away order. The criminal protective order is the strongest of these restraining orders. It comes from criminal court, and to the degree the court believes or it's been alleged that you have caused harm to another person and the court wants to protect that other person, a criminal restraining order or criminal protective order can be put in place, and it trumps all 3 of the other restraining orders. Then you have a civil harassment restraining order. Those are between parties that have not been in a romantic relationship. Maybe it's neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, or family member against family member. Then you have your domestic violence restraining orders, which is what we typically think of when we think about a restraining order, where there's been a romantic relationship and perhaps the parties have children. Maybe they don't, but there is a romantic relationship that has been in place at some point in time. And then the last thing you have is a stay-away order, and that's not a true restraining order as the others are, because the other 3 restraining orders, if they're issued by the court, they're going to be put into the CLETS system. That's CLETS. And if the police need to be called, then they have that in their system and they can enforce the restraining order and keep the peace. A stay-away order is more like a gentleman's agreement. So if you think about kids on the playground and perhaps they get into an argument and the teachers say, hey, behave yourselves from here on out, you're on your honor, I'm trusting you guys to do the right thing in the future. That's what a stay-away order is. If you have the dynamics where maybe it's a one-time incident and people are outside their character and that's not the way they normally behave, and you think that for a large part in the future, you guys can agree to stay away from each other and handle things appropriately, then a stay-away order might be a good option. But if you think that there will be possibilities of them harming you in the future and you want that police support, then you're going to want to go with one of the other 3 restraining orders. So dealing specifically with the domestic violence restraining order, I tend to think of movies like What's Love Got to Do with It, right? Where you have a couple that's, together a long period of time and there's chronic ongoing abuse, verbal and physical. They may have children in common that are witnessing some of the abuse. And so that's, I think, as a society, one of the core reasons why we have restraining orders with the enforcement power that they have, because, those situations concern us, right? Rightfully so. And then you also have, your fatal attraction situations where you meet the crazy person and you didn't know they were going to be crazy. And next thing you know, they've kidnapped your kid and took them to some amusement park just to freak you out. And there's no telling what this person is going to do. And that person needs to be restrained, right? That's not okay. And then, you have your stalking, right? And I think that's a lesser known restraining order, in that sometimes you think about Sleepless in Seattle, which I love. It is a classic, right? But if you think about the facts in the movie, it's a little concerning. You have a woman who hears a stranger on the radio, falls in love with him, and decides to use her work authority to find out his email, or not his email, but his personal contact information, where he lives, and then hires a private investigator to go find him and take pictures of him in his personal life, and then flies all the way across, the United States to watch him and his son for an entire day. That's concerning, right? If it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, it's adorable. But if it's anybody else, that's creepy and it's stalking and it's a restraining order. And then, there's also what I like to call texting wars, which is on the rise, where you're fighting on social media or through text, and it goes back and forth. And because it's on text and it's not in person, you feel a little more free. And you say things you may not say to somebody in person. You make threats that you may not make. And you call them names that you may not make in person. But because you're behind a screen, it's safe to do so, or so you think. And then these things are printed out and shown to the court. And depending on the history of relationship and the nature of the conversation, could be grounds for restraining order. You get into a little more dangerous territory when that person stops texting you back. So if you were in a text war alone and you sent 50 messages and they haven't responded and they said, leave me alone or stop it, that's when you start getting to even more probability of restraining order, because now you're disturbing the peace and harassing them. And those I've seen granted as restraining orders. Again, it depends on the context, right? The context of the relationship and the history and everything going around on in that situation. But that's a little dangerous, and you want to avoid those types of situations. Then you also have circling around the phone, where maybe somebody comes home and their significant others on their phone and texting or on social media, and they say, "Who are you talking to?" And the significant other doesn't respond, or they give the name of the person that they could very well be flirting with or trying to get with, and their partner goes on a rage, and so there's a fight about the phone. Could be physical, could be verbal, but to a large extent, if it's significant enough, the police could be called, and then again, you're in that realm of a restraining order. So I wanted to share that information with you. I hope it's helpful and gives you a little bit more knowledge about how restraining orders exist and can be used in court.